The air in the quiet suburban cul-de-sac always held a certain stillness, a deceptive calm that could lull you into believing that life within its manicured lawns and identical two-story houses was equally predictable. For Sarah Miller, a 48-year-old kindergarten teacher with a penchant for early morning jogs and a life she believed to be comfortably ordinary, that illusion shattered on an unremarkable Tuesday afternoon. The sun, a hazy orange disk behind the thinning autumn leaves, cast long shadows as she returned from grocery shopping, the weight of the recyclable bags a familiar pressure on her arms. She hummed a forgotten tune from her childhood, the kind of melody that surfaces unbidden, a pleasant ghost from a simpler time. Her house, the pale yellow one with the slightly overgrown rose bushes by the porch, stood as it always did, a beacon of stability in her neatly ordered world. Inside, a half-finished crossword puzzle lay on the kitchen table, next to a stack of student papers waiting to be graded. These were the anchors of her days, the small, predictable rituals that defined her existence. Her husband, David, a software engineer known for his quiet intellect and unwavering dependability, was likely still at his home office, the rhythmic tap-tap-tap of his keyboard a familiar soundtrack to her afternoons. They had built this life together, brick by unassuming brick, over 2 decades of shared dreams and quiet companionship. There were no grand adventures, no scandalous secrets, or so she thought. As she fumbled with her keys at the front door, a figure emerged from the shadows of the large oak tree in her neighbor's yard. He was tall, with a gaunt face and eyes that seemed to hold a weary knowledge of things best left unsaid. His clothes were nondescript, blending into the muted tones of the late afternoon. Yet there was an unsettling intensity in his gaze that made Sarah instinctively clutch her grocery bags tighter. He moved with a deliberate slowness, as if each step was weighed down by a profound burden. "Sarah Miller?" His voice was low, gravelly, like stones rubbing together. It wasn't a question, but a statement, delivered with an air of grim certainty. Sarah, her heart suddenly thumping a nervous rhythm against her ribs, managed a hesitant, "Yes? Do I know you?" She scanned her memory, searching for a connection, a flicker of recognition in the stranger's face. There was nothing. He was a complete unknown, an anomaly in the familiar landscape of her street. He didn't offer his name. Instead, his gaze intensified, boring into her with an unnerving focus. "Your life," he said, his voice barely a whisper, yet every word seemed to hang heavy in the still air. "It's based on a lie." The words struck Sarah like a physical blow, stealing the breath from her lungs. A lie? Her life, the foundation of everything she knew, everything she had built, suddenly felt fragile, like a sandcastle threatened by an unseen tide. She blinked, trying to process the stranger's bizarre pronouncement. Was this some kind of mistake? A prank? Surely, this gaunt man with the unsettling eyes had the wrong person. I don't understand," she stammered, her voice trembling slightly. "What are you talking about?" He took another slow step closer, and Sarah instinctively backed away, her hand instinctively reaching for the doorknob. There was something about this man, an aura of somber conviction, that sent a shiver of unease down her spine. He didn't seem menacing in a physically threatening way, but his words carried a weight that felt profoundly dangerous. "Everything you believe to be true," he continued, his voice gaining a slight urgency. "Your past, your family, it's not what you think." Sarah's mind raced, trying to make sense of his cryptic pronouncements. What could he possibly know about her life? She thought of her childhood, the small town in Ohio where she grew up, her loving parents, her uneventful school years. She thought of David, their wedding, the quiet joys of their life together. There were no hidden traumas, no buried secrets that she was aware of. Her life, by all accounts, had been a straightforward narrative of comfortable normalcy. "You're mistaken," she said, trying to sound more confident than she felt. "I don't know who you are or what you want, but you've got the wrong person." She tried to brush past him, to retreat into the safety of her home, but he subtly shifted his position, blocking her path. "There are things you need to know, Sarah," he insisted, his eyes pleading now, a flicker of desperation in their depths. Things that have been kept from you. For your own good, they said. But it was a lie. All of it. The intensity in his voice, the raw emotion that seemed to emanate from him, gave Sarah pause. He wasn't acting erratically. There was a disturbing sincerity in his words. A seed of doubt, tiny yet persistent, began to sprout in the fertile ground of her unease. What if there was something she didn't know? Something hidden beneath the placid surface of her life? What kind of lie? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The question felt heavy, loaded with an unspoken dread. He hesitated for a moment, his gaze flickering around the quiet street as if he expected someone to appear, to silence him. Then he leaned in slightly, his voice dropping even lower. Your name, Sarah Miller. It wasn't always that. Sarah stared at him, dumbfounded. Her name? It was the first thing she knew, the label that defined her since birth. It was on her driver's license, her teaching certificate, every document that marked her passage through life. How could her name be a lie? That's impossible, she said, shaking her head in disbelief. Is it? He countered, a sad, knowing smile playing on his lips. Think back, Sarah. Are there no gaps? No unanswered questions? No moments that didn't quite add up? Her mind instinctively recoiled from the suggestion. She didn't want to find cracks in the foundation of her reality. She preferred the comfortable familiarity of her known world, however ordinary it might be. Yet, as she searched her memories, a few disjointed fragments surfaced, fleeting moments of confusion, of things said or unsaid that had never quite made sense. A childhood photograph where she looked strangely unlike her parents. A hushed conversation she had overheard years ago, quickly silenced when she entered the room. Small, insignificant moments that she had dismissed at the time. But now, under the weight of the stranger's words, they seemed to take on a new, ominous significance. I don't know what you're trying to do, she said, her voice now laced with a growing suspicion. But I want you to leave. Now. He didn't move. His eyes remained fixed on hers, filled with a sorrowful intensity. I know this is hard to believe, Sarah, but I wouldn't be here if it wasn't true. My name is, well, that doesn't matter right now. What matters is that you know the truth about who you really are. He reached into the inner pocket of his jacket and pulled out a small, worn photograph. He held it out to her, his hand trembling slightly. Look at this, Sarah. Does this face look familiar? Hesitantly, Sarah reached out and took the photograph. It was old, the edges softened with time, the colors faded. It showed a young woman, perhaps in her early 20s, with striking dark hair and piercing blue eyes. There was a faint familiarity about her features, a subtle echo of something she couldn't quite place. I don't know, she said, her brow furrowed in confusion. Look closer, the stranger urged, his voice a low murmur. Look at the eyes. Look at the way she holds her head. Sarah studied the photograph more intently. The longer she looked, the more a strange, unsettling feeling began to creep over her. There was something about the woman in the picture that resonated deep within her, a ghostly echo of her own being. It was as if she was looking at a distorted reflection, a version of herself that had been lost or forgotten. Who is she? Sarah asked, her voice barely audible. The stranger's gaze was unwavering. That, Sarah, he said, his voice heavy with the weight of his revelation, is you. The photograph felt impossibly heavy in Sarah's trembling hand, a small rectangle of faded paper that held the power to unravel her entire existence. That's you. The stranger's words echoed in her ears, a chilling pronouncement that clashed violently with every fiber of her being. She looked from the young woman in the photo, a woman with eyes so strikingly similar to her own, yet with a spirit that felt both alien and intimately familiar, back to the gaunt man, his face etched with a mix of sorrow and urgent conviction. This is impossible, she whispered again, but this time, the conviction in her voice was gone, replaced by a raw, gnawing fear. I don't understand. Who are you? How do you have this? The man, still nameless, took a cautious step back, as if sensing the delicate precipice upon which Sarah now stood. "My name is Arthur," he finally offered, his voice softer, less accusatory now. "And I know things, Sarah, things that were buried deep, meant to stay hidden." He gestured vaguely down the street, towards the perfectly manicured lawns and the silent, watchful houses. "You think this life, this quiet little cul-de-sac, is all there is. But there's a whole other story, a truth that was erased for your protection." Protection. The word hung in the air, cold and sharp. Protection from what? And who would go to such lengths to protect her, to fabricate an entire reality? Her mind, usually so orderly and logical, felt like a scrambled mess of disconnected thoughts. David, her parents, her entire childhood. Was it all a stage play, a meticulously constructed facade? "My parents," Sarah stammered, her voice cracking. "My parents, they raised me. They're my parents." Arthur's eyes softened with a painful empathy. "They loved you, Sarah. Of that I have no doubt. But they weren't your biological parents. You were placed with them. A long time ago." The revelation hit her like a tidal wave, washing away the last vestiges of her comfortable reality. Adopted. The word felt foreign, alien, yet strangely, horrifyingly plausible. She had always dismissed those fleeting moments of disconnectedness, the times she felt slightly out of sync with her family, as typical adolescent angst or simple personality differences. Now, they screamed at her, undeniable proof of a life she hadn't truly known. "Why?" she choked out, tears welling in her eyes, hot and stinging. "Why would they do that? Why would no one tell me?" Arthur sighed, a sound heavy with resignation. "It was complicated, Sarah. A desperate situation. Your birth parents, they were in danger, serious danger. And to protect you, they made an unthinkable sacrifice. They gave you up, believing it was the only way you'd be safe. The adoption was closed, sealed. Your new parents, the Millers, were told to never reveal the truth. It was for your safety, they were told. A desperate situation. Danger." The words painted a terrifying picture, far removed from the idyllic childhood she had always believed in. Her world, once so predictable, was now tilting precariously on its axis. "What kind of danger?" she pressed, her voice barely a whisper, a desperate plea for answers. "Who were my birth parents? What happened to them?" Arthur looked around again, a flicker of apprehension in his eyes. "This isn't the place to talk, Sarah. It's too exposed. Someone could be listening. But I have proof. Documents, letters, things that will explain everything." He reached into his pocket again, this time pulling out a small, tarnished silver locket. "This was your mother's. Your real mother's. She wanted you to have it if the time ever came." He pressed the locket into her hand. It was warm from his touch, a tangible link to a past she never knew existed. Sarah's fingers traced the intricate engravings on its surface. A strange mixture of dread and a powerful, inexplicable yearning swirling within her. Inside, she knew, would be another piece of the puzzle, another glimpse into the truth. But she was afraid to open it, afraid of what she might find, afraid of the person she might discover she truly was. "I can meet you," Arthur said, his voice urgent now. "Tomorrow. There's a small diner on the outskirts of town, the Rusty Spoon. Be there at noon. I'll bring everything, all the answers you deserve." He gave her a precise address, rattling off the street name and number with an odd precision. Before Sarah could respond, before she could even formulate a single coherent thought, a car pulled into the cul-de-sac. It was David's car, his familiar blue sedan turning into their driveway. Arthur's eyes widened, a look of alarm flashing across his gaunt face. He didn't hesitate, with a final, desperate look at Sarah, a silent plea for her to trust him. He turned and melted back into the shadows of the oak tree, vanishing as quickly as he had appeared. David's car door opened, and he emerged, a smile on his face as he spotted Sarah by the door. "Hey, honey, long day?" he called out, completely oblivious to the dramatic scene that had just unfolded. Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs. She felt a profound sense of disorientation, as if she had just stepped out of a vivid, terrifying dream. Her hand instinctively closed around the locket, tucking it into her palm, out of sight. She forced a shaky smile, trying desperately to compose herself, to appear normal. "Just a bit tired," she managed, her voice strained. As David approached, his arm casually circling her waist, Sarah felt a sudden, inexplicable distance between them. The man she had shared her life with for 2 decades, the man she loved and trusted implicitly, suddenly felt like a stranger, a part of the fabricated reality that was now crumbling around her. Could he have known? Could he have been a part of this elaborate deception? The thought was a poison dart, striking at the very core of her relationship. That night, sleep was a distant, unreachable shore. Sarah lay awake, the locket clutched tight in her hand, its cold metal a constant reminder of Arthur's shattering revelation. Every memory, every shared moment with David, with her parents, was now replayed through a new, distorted lens. The casual comments, the subtle evasions, the things that never quite added up, they all coalesced into a terrifying mosaic of carefully constructed lies. She thought of David's unwavering support, his quiet strength. He had always been her rock. But what if that strength was built on a foundation of secrecy? What if his calm demeanor was merely a mask for a deep-seated complicity? The questions gnawed at her, turning her stomach into a churning vortex of doubt and fear. She tried to dismiss Arthur as a madman, a delusional stranger. But the photograph, the locket, the chilling familiarity in the eyes of the young woman in the picture, they were too real, too tangible to ignore. Around 3 a.m., unable to bear the torment any longer, Sarah carefully slipped out of bed, ensuring David remained undisturbed. She padded into the living room, the moonlight casting ghostly shadows through the windows. With trembling fingers, she finally opened the locket. Inside, nestled against a faded velvet lining, were 2 miniature portraits. One, a man with a kind, intelligent face and striking dark eyes that mirrored the woman in Arthur's photo. The other, the woman herself, even more beautiful and vibrant than in the older photograph, her eyes filled with a fierce determination. Below them, etched almost imperceptibly, were 2 names, Eleanor and Julian. Eleanor, Julian. These were her real parents. The truth, raw and painful, settled over her. She was not Sarah Miller. Not completely. She was the daughter of Eleanor and Julian, 2 people whose lives had been shrouded in danger, whose sacrifice had shaped her very existence. The weight of this new identity, this erased past, was almost unbearable. But then, another unsettling detail caught her eye. Beneath Eleanor's portrait, there was a tiny, almost invisible scratch. It wasn't a random mark. It was deliberate, a faint, almost imperceptible symbol that looked eerily like a stylized, jagged lightning bolt. She had seen that symbol before. Where? Her mind raced, sifting through years of memories. Then it clicked. A faded tattoo on the wrist of a fleeting acquaintance from years ago, a distant cousin of a college friend she had met only once. A symbol she had dismissed as unique but insignificant. Now it screamed at her with a chilling new meaning. It was a mark, a symbol of what? A group? A secret society? The questions piled higher, each one heavier than the last. The thought of meeting Arthur, of delving deeper into this horrifying new reality, filled her with a mixture of dread and an insatiable need for answers. She had to know. She had to understand the lie that had defined her life. But a primal fear also gripped her. If her life truly was based on a lie, what else was hidden? Who else was involved? And what dangers might she uncover by seeking the truth? The quiet suburban cul-de-sac no longer felt like a haven. It felt like a trap, a meticulously crafted cage designed to keep her oblivious, to keep her safe. Or was it to keep something else hidden? The morning light, usually a comforting glow, felt harsh and unforgiving as it streamed through Sarah's bedroom window. The locket, clutched in her hand, had left an imprint on her palm, a physical manifestation of the mental turmoil raging within her. She dressed in a daze, each movement mechanical, her mind replaying Arthur's words, the image of Eleanor and Julian's faces from the locket searing themselves into her memory. The symbol, that jagged lightning bolt, pulsed in her thoughts, a haunting riddle begging to be solved. David, oblivious, kissed her goodbye with his usual cheerful morning peck. "Big meeting today, honey. Might be late. Don't wait up." His words, once a comforting routine, now felt hollow, tinged with a suspicion that made Sarah's stomach churn. How could he be so normal, so unaware, while her entire world crumbled? Or was he aware? The chilling possibility tightened its grip around her heart. The drive to the Rusty Spoon Diner was a blur of suburban streets and familiar landmarks that now seemed alien, distorted by her fractured reality. Every passing car, every pedestrian on the sidewalk, felt like a potential threat, a watchful eye. She chastised herself for the paranoia, but the fear was a cold, insistent hand on her neck. Arthur's warning, someone could be listening, echoed ominously. The diner itself was precisely as Arthur had described. A small, unassuming building on the outskirts of town, its red paint peeling, its neon sign flickering erratically. Inside, the air hung heavy with the smell of stale coffee and frying bacon. Only a handful of patrons dotted the worn booths, their conversations a low hum. Sarah's eyes immediately found Arthur. He sat alone in a booth in the far corner, a large, worn briefcase resting on the seat beside him. His gaunt face looked even more drawn than yesterday, his eyes shadowed with exhaustion, but a flicker of relief crossed them as he saw her. As Sarah slid into the opposite seat, her heart pounded against her ribs like a trapped bird. "You came," Arthur said, his voice quiet, almost hoarse. "I need to know," Sarah responded, her voice trembling. "Everything. The truth." Arthur nodded, his gaze unwavering. He opened the briefcase, revealing a stack of yellow documents, faded photographs, and carefully folded letters. "It all starts with a woman named Lillian Vance," he began, his voice low and urgent, his eyes darting occasionally to the diner entrance. "She was Eleanor's sister, your aunt, a brilliant, fiercely independent journalist in the late 70s. She was investigating a powerful, clandestine organization, one that operated in the shadows, influencing politics, industry, even the justice system. They called themselves the Nexus." The name sent a shiver down Sarah's spine. The Nexus. It sounded like something out of a spy novel, not a secret connected to her quiet life. "Eleanor and Julian were also involved," Arthur continued, his voice barely a whisper. "Not as core members, but as highly skilled cryptographers, codebreakers for the government. They stumbled upon evidence that linked high-ranking Nexus members to international espionage and a series of disappearances, scientists, activists, anyone who posed a threat to their agenda. Your parents, Eleanor and Julian, were trying to expose them." Sarah listened, mesmerized and horrified, as Arthur meticulously laid out the pieces of her forgotten past. He showed her old newspaper clippings, grainy photos of Lillian Vance, articles about unexplained disappearances that had made headlines decades ago. There were coded messages, meticulously deciphered by Eleanor and Julian, hinting at illicit dealings and dark experiments. The jagged lightning bolt symbol was scattered throughout the documents, clearly the insignia of the Nexus. "They were close, Sarah," Arthur explained, his voice laced with anguish. "So close to exposing the Nexus to the world. But the Nexus found out. They were ruthless. They came for Lillian first. She disappeared without a trace. Then they came for Eleanor and Julian. You were just a baby, barely a year old." He paused, his eyes filled with a profound sorrow. "I was there, Sarah. I was Julian's younger brother. Their mission, their fight. It was my life too. We were a small, tight-knit group trying to bring down this Hydra. When the Nexus attacked, it was a bloodbath. I saw things no one should ever see. Eleanor and Julian fought bravely, but they were outnumbered, outgunned. They knew they couldn't save themselves, but they had one last chance to save you." Arthur's voice cracked with emotion. "They trusted me with you. We barely escaped, under heavy fire. They told me to get you out, to find a safe place, to make sure you were never found by the Nexus. to erase you completely from their records. That's when I contacted a network of sympathetic individuals. They specialized in helping people disappear, creating new lives, new identities. They found the Millers for you, a loving, stable couple who genuinely wanted a child. It was the only way to keep you safe, to keep you alive. Sarah felt a wave of nausea. Her entire existence, a desperate scramble for survival orchestrated by a dying family member. She looked at the photos of Eleanor and Julian, their faces so vibrant, so full of life, and felt a surge of grief for the parents she never knew, the lives they were forced to sacrifice. And David. Sarah's voice was barely a whisper, the question a desperate, final hope. Did he know? Were the Millers involved with the Nexus? Arthur shook his head grimly. No, the Millers were good people, Sarah. They had no idea about the Nexus or the danger. They were just normal. And David? He's as innocent as you are. He's a good man, Sarah. He truly loves you. He knows nothing of your true past. A perverse wave of relief washed over her, quickly followed by a fresh surge of guilt. She had suspected David, the man who had been her anchor. The thought made her feel physically ill. But the Nexus, Sarah pressed, a new fear replacing the old. Are they still active? Why are you telling me this now? Arthur's face hardened. They are very much active. And recently they've been expanding their reach. They've been hunting down anyone connected to those who tried to expose them, anyone who might hold a piece of the puzzle. I've been living in the shadows for decades, always one step ahead. But they're getting closer. I saw their operatives in the area. They're looking for something that Eleanor and Julian hid, something they believe you might have. He slid a final document across the table. It was a faded, handwritten letter from Eleanor, addressed to Arthur. Her handwriting, elegant and precise, was instantly recognizable from the locket's inscription. The letter spoke of a contingency plan, a hidden failsafe in case they were compromised. It mentioned a key, not a physical key, but a piece of vital information, a code, a location, something that could finally bring down the Nexus. And she had entrusted it to him. Arthur. She gave this letter to me just hours before they came for them, Arthur said, his voice raspy with suppressed emotion. She believed you, Sarah, were the ultimate failsafe. If the Nexus ever found you, it meant they had found everything else. And you were her last hope to expose them. She encoded a message within a message, a kind of legacy code to you. She knew you, with your intellect, your aptitude for puzzles, would eventually find it. It's hidden in plain sight, Sarah. A memory, a possession, something from your childhood that the Millers might have kept for you. Sarah stared at the letter, her mind reeling. Her life wasn't just based on a lie. It was a weapon, a final, desperate gambit in a war she hadn't even known existed. The jagged lightning bolt on Eleanor's locket, was that a clue? A hint to the legacy code? Just then, the diner door chimed, and two men in dark suits entered. They were impeccably dressed, with an air of cold efficiency. Their eyes swept the room, pausing briefly on Sarah and Arthur. Arthur's face went white. The Nexus, he whispered, his voice laced with terror. They found me. They're here for the key. They think I have it. He pushed the briefcase towards Sarah. Take this. All of it. Don't let them get it. And find the key, Sarah. Find the legacy code. It's the only way to stop them. Go. Now. He stood up, deliberately drawing the men's attention. Hey, over here, you two. Looking for me? He shouted, a desperate, defiant act of sacrifice. The two men moved swiftly, their gazes locking onto Arthur. Sarah didn't hesitate. She grabbed the briefcase, her mind racing, a primal instinct for survival kicking in. She scrambled out of the booth, knocking over a chair, and bolted for the back exit of the diner, the clatter of the chair and Arthur's shouts fading behind her as she burst into the cool, crisp air of the alley. The weight of the briefcase in her hand felt immense, heavy with the burden of her true past, and the terrifying future that now stretched before her. She was no longer Sarah Miller, kindergarten teacher. She was Eleanor and Julian's daughter, a reluctant soldier thrust into a war she never knew she was born into, carrying the weight of a secret that could either save or destroy everything. The alley air was sharp, a biting contrast to the stale warmth of the diner. Sarah ran, the heavy briefcase thudding against her leg with each frantic stride. The sounds of the diner, Arthur's defiant shouts, the muffled commotion, they faded behind her, replaced by the pounding of her own heart in her ears. She didn't know where she was going, only that she had to get away, had to protect the secrets now entrusted to her. Her mind raced, a whirlwind of fear, grief, and a burgeoning, fierce determination. Arthur's sacrifice, his desperate plea to find the legacy code, echoed in her mind, a new purpose forged in the crucible of chaos. She ran until her lungs burned, until her legs ached, finally collapsing behind a dumpster in a deserted industrial park. Gasping for breath, she clutched the briefcase to her chest, its contents a tangible link to a past she was only just beginning to comprehend. The Nexus, Eleanor and Julian, Lillian Vance, a clandestine war fought in the shadows, and she, Sarah Miller, the kindergarten teacher, was now inexplicably at its heart. As the adrenaline began to recede, a chilling realization dawned. The Nexus knew about her. They had found Arthur, and now they would be looking for her. The quiet suburban life she had cherished, the comfortable illusion, was gone, replaced by a terrifying reality where every shadow held a potential threat. She couldn't go home. Not yet. David was safe, oblivious, and she had to keep it that way. Hours later, as dusk painted the sky in bruised purples and oranges, Sarah found herself at a small, run-down motel on the edge of town. The anonymity was a flimsy shield, but it was all she had. Inside the dingy room, she spread Arthur's documents across the worn bedspread. Pages and pages of coded messages, surveillance reports, names, dates, and places. It was a labyrinth of information, a chilling chronicle of the Nexus's insidious reach. She meticulously went through every piece, her eyes scanning for any clue, any hint of the legacy code Eleanor had mentioned. The jagged lightning bolt symbol was everywhere, a constant, mocking reminder of the enemy. She focused on Eleanor's letter to Arthur, rereading it countless times, searching for the hidden message, the memory, a possession, something from your childhood. As the night wore on, fueled by stale coffee from the motel's vending machine, exhaustion began to set in, blurring the lines between reality and the nightmare she was living. She closed her eyes, trying to conjure memories of her early childhood, the time before she was Sarah Miller. But there was nothing. A blank slate. The Millers had done their job well, erasing her past with meticulous precision. Then a flicker, a faint, almost imperceptible image from her earliest memories, a recurring dream she'd had as a child, dismissed as childish fancy. A small, wooden music box, intricately carved with a winding path leading to a tiny, glowing house. She remembered the melody it played, a simple, haunting tune. She had loved that music box. It was the only thing from her very early childhood that her adoptive parents had kept for her, a small concession to a past they were otherwise determined to bury. They had told her it was a gift from a distant relative, a family heirloom. But now she wondered, could that be it? The possession? The memory? The music box was still in her old bedroom at the Miller's house, tucked away in a dusty box in the attic. She had to get it. The next morning, under the cloak of pre-dawn darkness, Sarah made her way back to her old house. The familiar pale yellow facade, the slightly overgrown rose bushes, they seemed to mock her with their false sense of security. She slipped in through the back door, a spare key she still kept feeling heavy and illicit in her hand. The house was quiet, David still asleep, his presence a painful reminder of the life she had lost, and the truth she now carried. She crept up to the attic, the floorboards creaking under her hesitant steps. The air was thick with dust and the scent of old memories. In a forgotten corner, beneath a pile of old blankets, she found it. The wooden music box. It looked exactly as she remembered, its carvings still intricate, its wood still smooth beneath her trembling fingers. With bated breath, she wound the key. The familiar, haunting melody filled the silent attic, a lullaby from a forgotten past. As the music played, her fingers instinctively traced the winding path carved into the lid. And then, she felt it. A tiny, almost imperceptible ridge. She pressed harder, and a small, hidden compartment clicked open. Inside, nestled on a bed of faded silk, was a single, intricately folded piece of parchment. It was another letter from Eleanor, her mother. But this one was different. It wasn't addressed to Arthur. It was addressed to "My dearest Star." Sarah's hands shook as she unfolded the parchment. The letter was written in a complex cipher, a series of seemingly random numbers and symbols. But then she saw it. Interspersed within the cipher, almost invisible, were tiny, stylized lightning bolts, the symbol of the Nexus. And beneath each lightning bolt, a single, clear letter. It was a code, a legacy code, just as Arthur had said. Eleanor had hidden the key within the very symbol of her enemy, a final act of defiance. With trembling fingers, Sarah began to decipher the message, using the patterns of the lightning bolts as her guide. It was slow, painstaking work, but as each letter revealed itself, a chilling truth began to emerge. The message wasn't a location or a name or a document. It was a frequency, a specific, obscure radio frequency, along with a date and time, and a single, chilling instruction. Broadcast the truth. The world must know. Eleanor and Julian hadn't just been cryptographers. They had also been brilliant engineers, working on a clandestine communication network for the government. They had built a failsafe, a way to bypass the Nexus's control over information, a way to broadcast an unedited, undeniable truth to the world. And the key was the frequency, the date, and the time. It was a broadcast of their final, damning evidence against the Nexus, a recording they had made, hidden deep within a secure server, designed to activate only when this specific frequency was used at that precise moment. The realization hit Sarah with the force of a physical blow. Her parents hadn't just died. They had laid a trap, a final, devastating blow against their oppressors, and she was the one destined to spring it. The weight of this responsibility was immense, terrifying. But then, another thought, colder and sharper, pierced through her fear. The Nexus knew Arthur was looking for the key. They knew he was trying to find her. They would be monitoring all communication, all activity. If she used that frequency, if she activated that broadcast, she would not only expose the Nexus, but she would expose herself. She would become their primary target, a beacon in the dark. She had a choice. She could walk away, try to rebuild a semblance of her old life, however tainted it now felt. Or she could honor her parents' sacrifice, unleash the truth, and face the terrifying consequences. The image of Arthur's gaunt face, his desperate plea, flashed in her mind. The faces of Eleanor and Julian from the locket, their eyes filled with determination. She thought of Lillian Vance, the fearless journalist silenced by the Nexus. She thought of all the disappeared, all the lives ruined by this shadowy organization. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about justice. It was about exposing the lie that had corrupted so many lives. With a deep, resolute breath, Sarah made her decision. She would broadcast the truth. The next few days were a blur of intense preparation. Using the information in Arthur's briefcase and her own research, she located an old, abandoned radio tower on the outskirts of the city, a relic from a bygone era that still had some functional equipment. She painstakingly repaired and reconfigured the ancient machinery, her engineering background, a dormant skill she never knew she possessed, surprisingly kicking in. It was as if Eleanor's blood, her intellect, flowed through her veins, guiding her hands. The night of the broadcast arrived, a cold, moonless expanse. Sarah stood alone in the decaying control room of the radio tower, the hum of the old machinery a rhythmic pulse in the silence. The briefcase lay open beside her, the locket clutched in her hand, its metal warm against her skin. She thought of David, safe in their bed, oblivious, a pang of sorrow, but also a fierce resolve. This was for him too, for a world free from the shadows of the Nexus. At precisely the designated time, Sarah flipped the final switch. A surge of power, a crackle of static, and then the airwaves came alive. Not with her voice, but with Eleanor and Julian's. A pre-recorded message, their final testimony, broadcast to every corner of the globe. Their voices, clear and resolute, laid bare the truth about the Nexus, their crimes, their influence, their network of corruption. It was a chilling, undeniable exposé, backed by the meticulously gathered evidence in Arthur's briefcase, which she had uploaded to a secure, anonymous server linked to the broadcast. The broadcast lasted only minutes, but its impact was immediate and seismic. News channels around the world were interrupted, their feeds taken over by the chilling voices of Eleanor and Julian. Governments scrambled, stock markets plunged, and the world watched in stunned silence as the truth, raw and unvarnished, ripped through the carefully constructed facade of the Nexus. Sarah stood there, watching the monitors, tears streaming down her face. A profound sense of relief, of completion, washed over her. Her parents had won. Their sacrifice had not been in vain. But the victory was not without its cost. As the broadcast ended, the silence in the control room was deafening. Sarah knew the Nexus would be coming for her. She had exposed them, and they would retaliate with brutal efficiency. She looked at the locket, at the faces of Eleanor and Julian, and felt a surge of strength. She was their daughter. She would not hide. The story of Sarah Miller, the kindergarten teacher who uncovered her true identity and brought down a global conspiracy, became a legend. She never truly disappeared, but she became a ghost in plain sight, always one step ahead, always watchful. The Nexus, though severely crippled, did not vanish completely. But their power was broken, their secrets exposed, their influence shattered. Sarah's life was irrevocably changed. She never returned to her quiet suburban cul-de-sac, never resumed her life as Sarah Miller. She became a protector, a silent guardian, using her newfound understanding of the shadows to help others who had been wronged, who had been silenced. She found a new purpose, a new identity forged not in a lie, but in the fierce, unyielding truth. And David? He eventually learned the truth, piecing it together from the global news reports and the lingering questions. He grieved for the life they had, but he also understood. He never stopped loving Sarah, the woman he had known, and the extraordinary woman she had become. Their love story, once so simple, was now a testament to resilience, to the enduring power of truth, even in the face of the most profound deception. So what about you? Have you ever felt like there's a piece of your story missing? A secret hidden just beneath the surface? Sometimes the most ordinary lives hold the most extraordinary truths. And remember, the truth, no matter how painful, always sets you free. If the story resonated with you, if it made you question the world around you, then please give this video a thumbs up. Subscribe to our channel for more stories that challenge your perceptions, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on our next deep dive into the mysteries that lie hidden in plain sight. Until next time, stay curious and always seek the truth.